Just a few weeks earlier, they were slaves. Then God led his people out of Egypt, crossed the Red Sea that he had Moses split in two, and enabled them to go on the journey towards the Promised Land. But once they crossed the Red Sea and entered the Sinai Peninsula, there was a nomadic group of warriors called the Amalekites. They were none too pleased to have these hundreds of thousands of Israelites coming through into their territory. So they would continue to harass the weary and weak Israelites as they moved through. They would take out the ones that were lagging behind, probably the most vulnerable. So perhaps an ancient expression of our own culture of death. They were just a continual enemy against Israel, really up until the time of David, about the year 1000 BC, when he finally defeated those Amalekites. But here, as we hear in our first reading, this wasn't just like a little band of raiders kind of, bothering the nation. They were at full-scale battle. Of course, the Israelites, they weren't trained warriors. A few weeks before, they were building pyramids under the thumb of Egypt or whatever. So they probably felt very ill-equipped for the fight. There's only one way they were going to be victorious, is if God came to their aid. And so we see Moses up on that hill, this arms raised, interceding for God's people down below, who needed him to act, to do what they couldn't do on their own. Now, perhaps there's the question of why Moses needed to intercede. The Israelites were God's chosen people. Couldn't he have just sort of let them just be victorious on their own? I think that's a fair question. Of course, God wanted them to be in relationship with him and to ask for what they needed so he could act upon it. It's part of the mystery of God and God's will that he chooses to incorporate our participation in what he wants to do. A lot of that happens, of course, then through prayer. Just raising our hearts and minds to God. St. John Damascene would say, prayer is not some just quick transaction, but it's part of an ongoing relationship. A relationship that then calls forth perseverance, and trust, and faith. So I think the story of the Amalekites, the Israelites, is actually meaningful for us as well. Maybe so many times we're just sort of fighting it out here down in the valley. And even in our Christian life, we know we struggle sometimes. Like the Israelites who went from slavery in Egypt through the waters of the Red Sea and then journeyed towards the Promised Land, we too have been set free from slavery to sin and death through the waters of baptism and are on our own journey towards the heavenly Promised Land. Of course, we know that life isn't easy, and the Christian life is not easy. Even though we're chosen by God through our baptism, like the Israelites, there's still things that can get in the way, like the Amalekites seem to threaten us, threaten our faith. We all have challenges, of course, trials, obstacles, temptations, distractions. We get weary sometimes, even in our life of faith or in our prayer. Maybe we feel unsupported, like Moses had to be supported in order to pray. I think the lesson today is that we just have to continue in prayer. We have to persevere. As the kids were coming up, little Evan, who I've never known to be shy, When I said, God wants us to ask for things in prayer, he said, why? St. Augustine would say that through our prayer, we exercise our desires. And then our prayer then prepares us to receive what God has in store for us. And if it seems like the Lord is not answering quickly, that's just to be able to expand our hearts, again, to continue to align ourselves with the will of God. And we know we need Him. We can't do this a life on our own. We need others. We need God in our life. And I think especially when we're here at Mass, we're entering into that living memorial of Christ's paschal mystery, his death and resurrection. We know from the cross that God is trustworthy, that he is faithful, that he has given of himself so that we can have life, and it's this God that we call upon in faith. Not some magic formula, of course, but a lived relationship with a God who can provide everything that we need, and who in his love for us wants to provide everything that we need to continue on our Christian journey to our heavenly home in the midst of all the things that can get in the way. Here in the Mass, too, it's not only our greatest act of prayer, but it's significant that we're all here together, because we all need to be supported in our life of prayer. So even if you don't know one another, your very being here is supporting everybody else. Because if we were here just by ourselves, one, there'd be a lot of masses to say. And two, there's just something about the fact that we're all here together on the journey, knowing that our good and gracious God is with us. And in a particular way, he gives us his very self and the sacrament of his body and blood as our spiritual food and drink for the journey. So as we encounter Christ here in the Mass today, let's indeed bring whatever it is that we're struggling with to the Lord, that we can place it on the altar, that we can ask the Lord to transform it, and to know that he is with us through it all.